It is a big night for the Sydney Swans, though. SCG, we've spoken about them at length over the summer, of course, after yet another grand final fail. And Dean Cox will officially coach his first game for premiership points, marking a new era at Sydney. Of course, he's taking over from the Swans' longest ever serving coach in John Longmire, who took over from Paul Roos, who was at the time the longest serving coach, who took over from Rodney Eade, who was also the longest serving coach. So there's a fair bit of pressure, I would say, Josh, going on to Dean Cox. I know that there's usually a honeymoon period for most coaches, but in Sydney, with that market, you've got to be successful, don't you? You've got to maintain it.
You certainly do, and they've been successful for a long period of time. Not often you get your first senior coaching role at a place that you've spent the last 7 years. So he served such a great apprenticeship. He's done the work. He's done the time. He gets a great opportunity to come in and take over a team that were unstoppable for most of last year. They reached the grand final, a second grand final in the past 3 years. So it's a great opportunity for Dean Cox, but he's got a brutal start to the year when you consider who they've got and who they're missing. Errol Goulden is going to be such a huge loss, plus Callum Mills. How can they handle that early?
I agree. I think I've been part of at Port Adelaide, we had Ken Hinkley, right? Clean cut, started the season with Ken Hinkley, Matty Primus, then we had Buddha Hawking take over. I suppose the one we can probably relate to most is the Sam Mitchell and Clarko handover. The thing that made it very difficult was actually because I suppose Clarko had his set ways which he wanted to I suppose, coach the team and the way they wanted to play, right? While that was happening, he was head coach at Hawthorn, and Sam Mitchell was their head coach of the VFL in the Box Hill. So when a player would come from Box Hill to Hawthorn, it actually made it very difficult for that player to kind of emulate exactly what was happening. Completely different game systems. And that's why I'm wondering whether they have an issue with Dean Cox's system. Is it going to be a man-to-man defence? Is it going to be a zone? What does it actually look like in terms of the, I suppose, the nuances, the stuff that you can't exactly get across in a few months?
But what we do know is the Swans are a very, very successful football team if we look back at history. And this is the stat of the week here. If you take a look, but Longmire, Roos and Eade took the Swans to 24 finals series in 29 seasons. So that's a little bit intimidating if you're Dean Cox, Josh.
It certainly is. No, that's going to be a hard act to follow. And all the noise coming out of the Sydney Swans, it's been a pretty brutal pre-season. I mean, we've heard a lot about the back-to-back 2Ks on day one of the pre-season. We've also heard quite a bit about the 7 hours it took to forensically dissect the grand final and what went wrong. Very different to how they handled the 2022 grand final disaster. So we're all intrigued to see how Friday night unfolds.